couple lined up already. So anyway, so if you're visiting or if you got somebody that would like to come, hey man, bring them here 6:30, get some coffee, get a meal, get something to drink, hang out a little bit and kind of, ease that transition into class at 7 o'clock. And number 2, so next Friday, I don't know, those of you that know Robert Jr., if you don't, so Robert Jr. is actually doing he's got the At the Well ministry. If you don't know about it, it's a worship night, testimony, kind of like what we do here on a bigger scale, except outside by the fire with a lot of different people. They're doing it next Friday. I talked to him today because, I'd ask about maybe canceling this and moving it there, but I said we couldn't do that. But I did say I would tell anybody who is interested here tonight, if you want to go there next week. I was there at the first one. It was an awesome experience. I loved being there. At the Well. It's out at their house at Farmington. If you want to go there, I can give you directions or point you to their Facebook page or something like that. There's singing, there's testimonies, there's, kind of like random preaching and things like that. It's a great experience. Fortunately, the way that it worked out, just because all their Saturdays were booked, they had to do one on a Friday night, so coincides with RU. But I told them, I said, look, we're not in competition. Like, I never have any problem when somebody else is doing something on the same night. My opinion, more options are better than fewer options. Somebody goes there, somebody comes here, it's a win, it's a win. I don't care, man. It's a good experience either way you choose. But I would tell him that I would put that out there tonight. So if you're interested, let me know afterwards, and I'll give you some more information. With that being said, I didn't really want to talk about too much RU new things until after VBS was over and everybody kind of catch their breath. But we've got some hangovers planned in the works here. So we're going to try to nail down the dates this week for the summer. We got one coming up, at least one in July, one in August, maybe one in September. If you don't know what a hangover is, it's we hang out when RU is over. Hangover. And so it's after RU is done, there's food. And I'll tell you what, we've done some in the past, and if you remember the ones that, like the original, like the OG hangovers that we had in the basement, in the attic, we had one up here. I mean, they got pretty wild with the singing, with the preaching, with the testimonies. I mean, it was an awesome experience, and I loved it. And so we're going to do some more of those. Oh, we had one in the field. Do you remember that? Cynthia was there. Kenny, were you there? Jen was there. The one in the field back there? That was fun. Really? Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, so we'd get a bunch of guys, and we'd have, 5 minutes. And I loved it because it was like, hey, look, we get 6 or 7 or 8 guys, so you got 5 minutes. No intro, no conclusion, like stand up, 5 minutes of your best, thought, whatever God gave you. We'd mix it in with singing in between, and it was a good time. So anyways, we'll get that all planned out, finish this week, and announced. But like I said, I'm just going to put that out there now, just kind of tease y'all, because I don't want to do anything else until VBS is over. But now that it's over, we can talk about things like that. So anyways, At the Well, food starts next week, and then we've got some hangovers coming up. I had this thought. So tonight, I just really wanted to talk about, this is kind of a message from me, and I was looking through that this week, and I was thinking about it tonight even. I thought, you know what, this is where I'm just going to this message is for myself. And so if you're here tonight, you're just welcome to listen along, and maybe it applies to you, maybe it doesn't. But man, this is something that I struggle with, and I find myself kind of repeatedly through the course of life, every couple of months or years even, falling into the same pattern of thinking. And if I think about the times in life when I struggled the most, so, back in the day, I had struggled with addictions, and it was, with drugs, with drinking, with tobacco, things like that. And then God gave me victory over those things. But then I found out, really, when you get victory over that, because there's a reason why I went the path that I did, right? And when I was in high school, looking back now, the reason was to fit in. It's acceptance, and loneliness or acceptance, like, don't underestimate that. That's a powerful thing. Like, I grew up, I transitioned schools in 10th grade or 9th grade, and so I went from this, like, small private Christian school from K through 8, and then to a large public school in 9th. And, I was still had these big old glasses, these big Coke bottle glasses, and my hair combed all funky, like, and dressed in, like, turtlenecks with, like, I don't even know, but I look at the pictures of back in the day, and I was like, man, I don't know how my parents let me out of the house, but I was quiet, I was shy, man. It was hard to make friends, but you know what? After a while, getting tired of being lonely, meeting a couple of people that invited me to, some places on Friday night, I found out how easy it is to get accepted, and man, I ran with it. But then, after I got past that for years, I I realized that I was doing those things because ultimately that was the fruit of kind of what I was trying to cover up, right? And the real thing was people. And the true temptations when it came to relationships, when it came to life, when it came to business, when it came to careers, like those were the things that I actually needed to solve. And you know, I had run from those and tried to cover it up with substances. And then I got over that. And yet life was still tough at times. And I kind of wondered to myself, you know, why is it so? But I look at that and I think, man, that was really where the battle is. And because the battle, usually the same temptations have to do with people or relationships, situations and circumstances, like that never changes. There's always going to be people in our lives. We're always going to be in a situation. Not all of them are going to be great. And circumstances are usually, you know, we control very little of what we actually go through. That actually was what kind of, I guess, triggers me more than anything, because I think about the times in my life where, for whatever reason, I went off the rails, or I went into depression, or I went whatever. It usually hinged on a relationship or a relationship that went bad, an expectation that I had that didn't work out, whether it was with people, whether it was a job, whether it was with family, like whether it was with, honestly, church. I've had these expectations of church that did not work out. And that really, more than anything, sent me into some tailspin, because you think, man, church should be the easiest. And I'll tell you what, it's often the opposite is true. But I think if you can think of this, and I love your testimony, it got me thinking about this. If you can, you know, if you think about it, you could probably think of a hurt or a betrayal in your life, and that hurt or that betrayal is probably associated with a person. It may be small, it may be insignificant, it may be big, but everybody has those hurts, they have those betrayals, and it could be something, you know, you mentioned stubbing toes. It could be something like that. I mentioned biting my lip, you know, like the inside of your lip. I don't know if everybody ever does that, but then you bite it and then it gets bigger and you chew on it. Man, that frustrates me to no end. Could be traffic. Could be the tone of somebody's voice. Anybody ever use a, you know, less than positive or a rude tone of voice with you, and you're just like, oh my goodness, what? It could be, like I said, little things, like somebody's slow to respond to a text. You ever text anybody and they don't text back for like 5 minutes? And you're like, what on earth are you doing leaving me hanging? And you're like, that's it. Like, they don't care about me. You know, they have no regard for what I'm doing. Can I just put this out there? You know, we've got a bunch of biases built into our psyche, our mind. You know, there's this thing that's called the frequency illusion, right? Sometimes it's associated with, I guess one of the things is cars. You ever really want a car? You want a vehicle, right? And you think, man, I want this particular vehicle. Nobody's got it. And then you buy that car, and now you're driving down the road, and you're like, man, everybody bought the same thing, right? Because now that it's top of mind, you're looking for it. And you see it more frequently. It's called the frequency illusion, and it applies to all sort of things in our life. If you apply it to offense, if you look for offense, guess what's going to happen? You're always going to find it. If you're looking for offense, you're going to see it out there, you're going to see it out there, you're going to see it out there, because it's the top of your mind, and you're just going to notice it more. It doesn't mean it happens more or less. It just means you're constantly noticing it. And so here's the thing. I was looking at 1 Samuel chapter 1, and I'll just kind of give you where I was at, and then just two things that I realized in this situation. So I moved to Georgia 2016. It was a great opportunity with some friends and to start something super cool. Actually, they had started it, and I was going to join, and it was just going to be this kind of really good opportunity. It was like this marriage of my like professional career as software engineering, web development, and like my ministry aspirations, right? Of like RU director, like pastoring, like all those things like come together. And so we went down there. You know, it started off well, good friends, good cause, cool projects. You know, I wasn't making maybe like half of what I probably would make in like a normal, you know, career or business or something like that. But, you know, I don't ever stress those things. When I look at jobs, like I've never stressed about having a job or working in my life. I always looked at it like God's going to give me the job. You know, God always provides and he always has. So I really didn't stress it. And I was thankful for it. But here's the thing that happens, right? Because like my expectation, especially when it comes to money and finances, like ultimately over time you want those things to grow, right? Like you don't really want to be making the same thing now that you did 10 years ago, or in my case now that I'm making 6 years ago. Like, the hope was that it would go up, and not, because if it's staying the same, with inflation and everything, it's ultimately going down. But, like, these opportunities were coming, man. We get excited about an opportunity to make some money or do something cool, and then guess what? Didn't materialize. Next one, didn't materialize. And didn't materialize. Job got more stressful, man. We were working, and we were working hard, but the compensation didn't really change, and so I started in my mind thinking, nobody really cares, right? Like, if they only knew, like, we're working harder now than when we started, but we're making the same, and it's just not fair, and why is this? So, over time, it was just like, I left. Which is fine. We move on. Cool. You want a different job? It's not for you? Like, by all means, find what fits. But the thing is, I held a grudge. And the reason is because there was a lot of things I thought should have been done better, right? Like, I should have made more. I should have had, they should have been thanked, like somebody should have said thank you every now and then, I don't know if you ever served in a church or you worked in a business or something like that, and your boss never says thank you, or the pastor never says thank you, or whatever. It's good to be thanked. And if you don't get thanked at least every now and then, like an attaboy every now and then, like, you get resentful. And so there's all these things, like, at least done something small, if something big's not possible. And, to me, it's funny because I left there thinking that it was just the bad character of the people that I worked for and that I worked with. They were just typical church people. That's just because they really didn't care about me and those sort of things. But then God reminded me this one thought. He said, I thought you said I gave you the job. I was like, I did. Like, I always say God provides a job. And then God was like, well, if you said I gave you the job, don't you think I knew how it was going to go? And I was like, God, you got a good point there. And I was like, I suppose, yes. And that was my realization. And here's the thing. I had the realization of this point. I can't speak out of both sides of my mouth. If God was good to provide for me, then he surely knew what would happen with him. So if I want to give God credit for giving me this thing, in this case, my job, then I can't give him the blame when it doesn't go like I thought it should. Because God already knew that when he gave me the job, right? So if I'm going to pat myself on the chest and be like, oh yeah, giving God the credit, and then it doesn't go how I think, and I give God the blame, then I'm a hypocrite. And I owe God an apology. And I said, that's an interesting thought. And there's a verse, the chapter here in 1 Samuel chapter 1. If you know nothing about it, there's a lady whose name is Hannah. She wants the one thing in her life more than anything that she can't have, which is a son. She does not have a son, a child. God does not seem to give her this child. Now, the problem was that her husband also had another wife. And, for somebody that's like, well, polygamy was never banned, and God never banned polygamy specifically in the Bible. Like, okay, but you find me find one example where it ever worked out good, and we can start the conversation from there, because there actually never is one good example, and this is just one of many. But here's the thing. His other wife, multiple children. She has 0. And it seems like the only thing she wants is the one thing that God doesn't give. And her other, I don't even know how you would call that, his other wife, has many, so it's kind of her rival, and really she's making Hannah's life miserable, right? Rubbing it in and just, comments and all that sort of thing. That is compounded by the problem that her husband really doesn't seem to understand what's going on. He's not helping the situation. I'm just not going to go down that path, but the thing is, they just kind of do the same thing. Every year, they go to the temple. Every year, she prays. Every year, same thing. Other lady's got kids. Hannah doesn't. Other lady is rubbing it in Hannah's face. Hannah's mad. Hannah's bitter. And if you put yourself in a situation, it doesn't have to be kids. It could be career. It could be something else. The one thing that you want is the one thing God doesn't seem to give, and you try to do the same thing over and over and over again, you'll probably find yourself in a position of mad at God. Here's the thing, and I'll just say this. If you become focused on what should have been, and this is why I'm preaching to me, if you become focused on what should have been, then you'll never see what can be. And I find myself always focused back here with what I think should have been and how I think I should have been treated and how, the people did me wrong, or if they didn't do me wrong, they at least didn't do how I felt I should have been treated or whatever, and I get stuck looking back here, and I miss opportunities on what can be. And so we look at Hannah and her situation. I'll just read it here if you don't have a Bible. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 9. Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. She was in bitterness of soul. And if you know anything about bitterness, then you understand where she's at. She prayed to the Lord, and she wept sore. Bitter people are anguished. In her case, it caused tears. Same thing with David in the Psalms. And she vowed and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thy handmaid, remember me, don't forget thine handmaid, but give thine handmaid a man-child. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. There shall no razor come upon his head. She's making a vow to the Lord here. And so that's the thing. She is deep in anguish, crying bitterly, and she does the right thing, because the reality of her situation is she couldn't do anything about it, but God can handle her hurt. And God can handle your hurt. And God can handle my hurt. And if there's nothing else, see, one thing that I hate and one thing that I've learned is I would much rather somebody be mad at me and come at me and just get it off your chest. If that means you're yelling, I've had folks curse. Listen, don't keep it bottled up and just, be passive aggressive towards me like the rest of our relationship. Kenny, we'll talk afterwards. But honestly, I would rather somebody just be mad at me. I tell my kids, look, if you're mad, be mad at me. Don't just hold it all in and just, be this kind of snobby, sarcastic little, keep your passive aggressive to yourself. Tell me, and let's just deal with it. Rather than just keep it bottled up inside, because that's the thing. And I'm not sure if God feels like this with us. But I think rather than me just kind of cutting off my relationship with God and say, well, it didn't work out so well, so I'm not going to talk and I'm not going to walk and we're not going to really be close, let me just take it to God and be mad at him. And see, mad is not where I want us to end up, but if I have to express my anger as a starting point, I'm going to start there. I can't truly reconcile or heal a hurt until I put a name to it, because you can't heal a hurt that you can't put a name to. That's really where I'm going to start. But, if I have to get it off my chest, like Hannah did, that's what I'm going to do. If you're in bitterness, if you're in anguish, start by going to God and just put it all out there. He says, cast all my burdens, you cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. Take him up on that. He didn't say how to cast it. He didn't say to be necessarily polite. He didn't say, when you wake up in the morning and you're in a good mood. He didn't say, when you're sitting on the deck at night watching a beautiful sunset. He said cast. Wherever you are, just shove it all up there. Give it to God. See what he does with it. And so we skip a few verses here. In verse 19, they rose up in the morning early, and they worshiped before the Lord and returned. I'm skipping a little bit of her talking to her husband. But notice this. She's literally face to the floor, crying, weeping, probably yelling, God, so much so that the priest who's watching her, Eli, thinks she's actually drunk, she's out of her mind, drunk, normal people don't do this sort of thing. You know what happened? Gave it all to God, cast it all, and look what happens. She rose up in the morning early and worship before the Lord. Her worship came back and returned and came to their house in Ramah, and God, he knew her and God remembered her. What's so interesting? When she's able to do that and her worship comes back, and it makes me think of this quote, and it's not mine, I can't remember where, but a waiting season is not a wasted season. A waiting season is not a wasted season. It's only wasted if you lose faith. You lose hope. Verse 20, I asked the Lord for him. There it is. She asked God. She put it all out there. That's all she can do. And she knew that God's delays aren't always God's denials. You know why we get weary doing well sometimes? See, we get some victory in our life over substance, over whatever we're going through, and then we actually have to face whatever reality is that we were covering with these substances, trying to get away from, and then we're kind of oh my goodness, I've been doing so good, and how can I be struggling again? Well, the thing is, God doesn't work on our timetable. You know, his timeline is not our timeline, so it's easy to kind of get weary. But God's delays, they're not even really delays. God's delays are not always God's denials. You know, for houses, you think about the situations and things that you want. Anybody really want a house? You got this particular house, and you loved it or a condo, or apartment, or whatever the case was, and then you moved in, and you were so happy, and then the fridge broke, and then the floor needed replaced, and then the toilet stopped working, and then there was a hole in the roof, and like now all of a sudden this beautiful thing that you just wanted so much has become this money pit, and now you're just like cursing the house. You ever get car fever? You just want, oh man, I got car fever real bad when it comes to Jeeps. And I get a Jeep, and then I sell it, and like don't need it anymore, but then it comes back. You get car fever, and then you get that vehicle, and maybe it's at the top of your budget. You use all your car budget every month on monthly payment, and then that first set of tires needs to be replaced. And then you get that emergency, you know, whatever the case is, water pump breaks, or, you know, something's got a leak, and then all of a sudden you get all these repair costs, and you're cursing it, or you're complaining about it. I mean, this happens all the time. And, you know, whatever. So if you think about the situations, I mean, big or small, that we blame God for, right? Like we look at those situations where we blame God, that's called a grudge. Grudge is just that persistent feeling of ill will or resentment. And as long as you carry that grudge, the perpetual feeling of resentment or ill will towards someone or something, then you're going to have problems. You're going to have an opportunity for temptation. It's going to be right there, and it's going to pull you back to whatever it is that you're using to cope with that grudge. Does forgiving change the situation? No, not necessarily, but guess what? Forgiving changes you, and if we look at Hannah's case, that's a good place to start. If you want things to be different, because here's the thing, that was my second realization. I was always blaming people, and I was always like, well, that's not fair. I can't believe they did that, whatever the case is, and I totally forgot. My second realization was this, and I was reading, it's called this, the fundamental attribution error. You ever look at somebody who did something wrong to you, and you thought it's because they have poor character? They're just a bad judge of whatever. They don't care. Here's the thing. You do that same thing to somebody else. You forgot their birthday, somebody that was close. You forgot to, you promised to do something and then you didn't. You were going to be there and you weren't. And you know what we say to ourselves? We've got an excuse. If I did it to disappoint you, there's a good reason. I was running late. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the time. Like, give me a break. But see, if somebody else does something offensive, then it's a character flaw. Well, they're just mean. Well, they're just rude. Well, they're just, whatever the case is. See, we've got this bias that's built in to our behavior, so the bias is to attribute our own behavior to our circumstances. We do something bad or something dumb or something silly to somebody else, well, it's circumstances. Man, I didn't have the time. I didn't have the money. You don't understand how busy I am. You don't understand what I'm going through. But we attribute somebody else's actions to their character. See, if they do that to us, I can't believe they forgot. What a jerk. Man, I can't believe they didn't show up. I'm never going to their birthday again. Man, I can't believe whatever. For somebody else, it's character. For us, it's our circumstances, and we get a pass. See, because that's the thing. The people that I get mad at, man, I scroll through my Instagram, I get so many memories, so many trips, so many things about life that I loved that involved them. And if I'm going to hate on that person, if I'm going to hate on that situation, if I'm going to hate on that circumstance that I used to be thankful for, that I used to love, that I used to enjoy, then I'm a hypocrite, just like I am blaming God for the things that I used to, be thankful for. And so I can't get one without the other. Proverbs 19:11 says this, and I'll close. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. And so when it comes to grudges, when it comes to forgiveness, that's what we're talking about. Overlooking an offense does not mean we pretend it doesn't exist. It exists. It's there. The scars are real, not physical, but emotional. It's just a conscious decision to let it go. The word there in the Hebrew literally means to pass over. Do you realizing that letting something go is a form of forgiveness? And it's easier said than done, believe me. Like, it takes some time. But see, instead of focusing on that offense and dwelling on it, replaying it, magnifying it, choose to pass over it. Don't pretend it didn't exist, because it did, and you're always going to have those memories. Just pass over. If that doesn't work, next time it comes up, pass over it again, and then pass over it again. And at some point, you'll realize, man, I'm actually over it. Like, because this thought a week ago, a month ago, a year ago would have sent me into a tailspin. But now, pass over it. And see, when you get to that point, you'll realize the one thing. When you're able to finally pass over that thing, whatever it was, you'll realize that the calling ahead of you is greater than the offenses behind you. The calling ahead of me is greater than the offenses behind me. And you see, that was my realization. And I'm going to tell you what, and this is a huge caveat, is it's easier said than done. Because even though that, pass over it, it's a decision in the moment, but that decision in that moment happened over and over and over and over again, and it took me weeks, led to months, led to probably about 2 years before I finally realized I'm over it. And the calling ahead of me now is greater than the offenses behind me. I'll challenge you tonight. There's probably something similar in your life, a person, a place, a thing, a situation, a circumstance. And you can tie those hurts, those betrayals, those grudges to that particular thing. And that's always going to haunt you, and that's always going to be there, and it's always going to trip you up. It's always going to be that thing that is a potential landmine in your life, in your road or your path of life. Spend some time, ask the Lord, identify that thing or those things. And you don't have to work on forgiveness in a sense, but work on next time that comes up in your mind, pass over it. Try it. Pass over. And pass over again. If it takes 100 times, pass over it, and eventually you'll get to the point where you are over it. And then, once you're over it, you'll see the calling ahead of you, it's wide open. The fences behind you, those are small in comparison. Let's pray. God, we love you. Thanks so much for tonight. Lord, thanks for everybody's patience. I know we went over, and we had a good time with VBS, and we had a good time in the first talk, but God, I pray that you'd help us this week. We're going to run into those people. We're going to think about them. If we don't run into them, we're going to think about the people and the wrongs and the things that they did to us or didn't do that we expected. God, I pray that you'd help us in that moment, have a little bit of strength, turn to you, pass over it. Not pretend it didn't exist, but just overlook it. And God, I pray that being able to do that would help us to get past that. And God, when we get past that point and we're able to look back, those offenses exist, they were there, we're not pretending that they weren't, but God, the opportunity in front of us is greater than the offenses behind us. When we get to that point, God, I pray we'll be able to come back here, whether it's next week, next month, or next year, and have a testimony to your goodness and how you helped us to overcome. And I pray this in your name. Amen. All right, before we go tonight, got the 3 awards we are getting for Miss Laurel, her appreciation certificate. Come on down and give her a round of applause. Yes. Congratulations. I will sign that when we're done. I get my pen. And let's see, we've got a we're getting the Beholds 12 Challenge pin for Denise. Congratulations. We got the nice RU umbrella. Yes, congrats.
So much.
Nice job. And last but not least at all, Mary. She's getting her Joy Fruit, her 1040 window, and her New Testament pin. Mary, congratulations. Mary Horvath, come on down. 3 of them. Man, that's awesome. The fruit is here tonight. I did not lose it. There you go. Thank you so much. All right. Everybody, appreciate y'all being here. Thank you so much. If you want to stick around, have some coffee, have some conversation, feel free to do so. If you got to run, we'll see you next time. If you want to join us on Sunday, feel free to do so. Let's pray. We'll hit the road. Lord, keep us safe as we go. When temptation comes knocking tonight, God, I pray that you give us victory, be able to make it to bed, wake up in the morning, clear mind, with a willing spirit and a gratitude in our hearts. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.